I indicated to somebody once technology changes, but the human condition doesn't.
Whether or not they were the case. If you do mitochondrial DNA, which comes from only the mother. Italian Jews have Italian mitochondrial DNA, and Polish Jews have Polish. That means everybody married girls from the country. They were travelers. They settled down and they married some.
Okay, gentlemen, while we're gathering, I'm going to start the learning sponsors. We've got quite a setup today. Okay, well, what happened was today is the 27th, and so we have some people that must have only donated since then. So we've got quite a few. Learning sponsors: A Year of Learning, Friends of Malaskotsky, Moshe Zelig ben Mordechai, Martin Lippman and family in memory of his wife, Malka Chana bat Pinchas, Friends of Herb Jeremiah, Tzvi ben Zev, Friends of Sam Coleman, Shmuel ben Yaakov, Friends of Gideon Lazinski, Mordechai Shlomo ben Meir, Bella and David Adler in memory of her father, Eliyahu ben Yosef Kohen, those who were inspired by our Rebbetzin Emerita, Sheila Shapiro, Sarah Esther Malkabat, Meshulam Yisachar, Gail and Leslie Kaplan, in memory of their parents, Mushka Shpunzabat Yosef Chaim Bechava, Chanan ben Moshe Eliezer Vechana, Pesha bat Shmuel Yitzchak Halevi V'Tzipora, Isser ben Yoel Moshe HaKohen Vechana, Rexford Friends of Gladys Sherman, Gutta bat Meir, Michael Klein and Friends of Judah Klein, Yehuda Tzvi ben Chaim, Marsha Bronner in memory of her husband, Harav Yerachmiel ben Shmuel, A Month of Learning by Ruvain Podol and Susan Podolsky, in memory of his father, Tzvi ben Pinchas, A Week of Learning. By Chaim Aber in memory of his father, Aaron Mayer, and by Ruth Burian in memory of her husband, Moshe ben Mordechai. Then we have today, we have Days of Learning, a Dove Bloodlander in honor of Madeline's special birthday, Cheryl and David Wiskowski in memory of her father, Baruch ben Shmaryahu, Harriet Brick in memory of her husband, David Pinchas ben Zorach Dov, Walter and Sippy Fried in memory of his father, Avram Meir ben Aryeh Leib. And today his 27th. We have Gail and Milton Meller in memory of her sister, Brindle bat Aryeh Leib, as well as Zahava Baum in memory of her husband, Yosef ben Ruvain. Okay. May the Shamas have an Aliyah, Crank Rafia, Velter Shir Shamat Aliyah, and the Chol B'nai Israel a good Kabench Jar.
Amen.
Okay. All right. Yes, sir.
Maybe you should announce the CM at some of the shul davening time.
What you say, yes?
It was in the bulletin.
I saw it, it's small.
You didn't get to.
But you know what, you tell the few people that we know for sure that continue with the diet.
So forth.
Yeah, who did you have?
Tony Blooming, it's a Paris.
Yeah,
And I just spoke to Casey, he didn't know about it. So he can-
I did because he didn't read the bulletin.
Go.
Wow.
I'll buy you cream cheese.
He,
We fit in here too. Don't worry about it. Now I'm gonna sit on your shoulder. We'll build a new building.
all right.
What's the problem now? We could take out the big chairs, put the old chairs back, and have 20 more seats.
We'll have enough room.
Oh, you found it? Where was it?
Okay, I want to start for today. It's a lot of Gemara, so we need to get started, gentlemen. Okay?
How far did you get yesterday?
We got, well,
Down at Bundy.
we got to, I'm going to start where we left off yesterday, which was really on the bottom of Ayin Dalet Amud Beis. It's about 5 lines up from the very bottom. Tanu Rabbanan.
Rabbanan.
Yeah. Okay.
So finally getting to little boys.
Well, that depends. They're not so little if they can be considered valid beings.
9 days old, years old, a little boy. I mean, he's
All right. So that's the point. Tanu Rabbanan says a Braita. Ben Tesha Shanim V'Yom Echad. Why all of a sudden are we talking about a boy
because we
that's 9 years old and 1 day? Okay. The daf I listened to in preparation, okay, went into an extensive discussion on this. It had to do with the Bas Kohen. It had to do with relationship with the Tsar, and that she wouldn't eat Truma again, wouldn't be able to eat Truma. And so what is a valid bia is what the background of this
we had talked
question
about 3
is.
in a day for
Okay.
girls, so we have
So right, that's what I did yesterday. I pointed that out. Okay. So if that is post sale, the point is, okay, then if the question is the offspring is pohel, so then the woman is pasul as well. Okay. So in other words, our first question is it a valid bia? And if so, does that render the woman herself pasul? And what does that render the progeny? And so on. So that's where we come into our yichus, as well as the discussion of what we saw before as the age of a girl. Okay. So
too likely that be progeny from a 9-year-old.
we don't know. You're talking about realia or theory. Okay. So that's the point. So Tanu Rabbanan ben Tesha Shanim B'Yom Echad. Okay. That young man. Okay. Ger, Amoni, Moavi, Mitzri, Va'adomi, Kuti, Unatin, Halal, Umamzer. Okay. So in any of these cases, okay, what we're saying is that in all of these cases, it's such that they are considered psulim in terms of their yichus, and as a result, if and when they have relationship with a bas kohen, shaba'ala kohenet, okay, and not just okay, clearly then that's going to indicate that she's not eligible to eat truma, okay, right? Because the bia is psula, and it removes her from being eligible to eat truma. But not only that, in her case, va'al halaviyah, okay, va'al bat Yisrael, pasluha. In all of those cases, they render the yichus status of the woman pasul as well.
So neither Leviah nor the Israelis can marry a Kohen.
Okay,
And a
so
Kohenis is like kicked out of the crowd.
well, I wouldn't phrase it exactly like that. I would phrase it that they are not only are they ineligible to marry a Kohen, but their progeny also is in the status of pasul. Okay, and if their status is pasul, okay, how does that has an impact on their own, on the status not only of how their not marriage situations are, but maybe even beyond that.
Yeah.
So, for example, it could be that if you were going to argue that a Levi that's pasul in the time of the Beis Hamikdash should not be able to do certain things, or things like that. Okay, so it applies, okay, in all of these cases. All right. Rabbi Yossi Omer says, Rabbi Yossi, he says, Kol shezaro pasul, in any case where the progeny is pasul, post sale, that then renders
the
woman herself yichus from a point of view pasul. Okay, the kol she'ein zaro pasul, and in any situation where the progeny is not rendered to be pasul in terms of yichus, ein no posel, then it does not render the woman as a status of
It's like
posel.
Shani.
Okay. All right. So what happens? Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, as we go to today's long daf. Okay. Kol she'atano se bito. Okay. When you can marry let's say, the daughter of a Kohen. Okay. No se bito. Atono se almanoto. You can also marry his widow. The kol she'i. So he's giving a slightly different clarification. If you can marry the daughter, you can marry the widow. Say. V'chol she'iatanose bito, and where you cannot marry the daughter, iatanose almanato, you cannot marry the widow. My ika bain Tanakama uvein Rabbi Yossi. So what's the difference between the earlier statement and Rabbi Yossi's phraseology? Right? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, says Rabbi Yochanan. By the way, Rabbi Yossi, remember, was the view that it's the offspring. Okay, that we're counting on him, right? Right. So what happens? Right. If the offspring view, I'm going to call it that. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mitzri Sheni Ika Beinai. Okay. So Rabbi Yochanan is saying it's where she may marry a second generation Egyptian. Okay. Why? Because according to the Torah, the progeny that she would have, in theory, would be a third generation Mitzri. Okay, and therefore, that in that situation, he's able to enter the Kahal Hashem, and therefore would not render her.
She's a widow.
Okay, right? A pasul in terms of being able to marry a Kohen. Okay. On the other hand, if you don't hold like Rabbi Yossi, what we're calling the offspring view, okay, therefore then it's a different story.
And she's
right? Right. Then the point is she could not, in that situation, by marrying the second generation Egyptian, her status becomes pasul as well. And therefore, when she becomes a widow, she could not marry a Kohen. Okay. And if she's the daughter of a Kohen, she still does not get Truma. Yes, Ted. Egyptian? Second generation Egyptian. Because because the Torah, remember, says that a third generation Egyptian can enter Kahal.
All of this.
Wait, I want to hear his question. What's right? He's also talking those others, but he's focusing on this particular issue of the machloket between the view of offspring and the view versus which was Rabbi Yossi's argument, as opposed to the other presentation. Okay.
It's important to note that today's Egyptians are not Egyptians.
All right, wait, that's a separate issue. Okay. Exactly. Right, specifically. Right. Okay. All right, so what happens? So we said mitzvah sheni ika beinai. That would be an example of the difference between the two views. Ushnehem lo lamduha elami kohen gadol ba'amana, and both of them learned it basically on the model or the archetype of kohen gadol ba'amana. Okay, and the Gemara is going to explain this a little bit in itself. The Tana, as we learned, Tana Kama Sava. Why? Because Tana Kama was of the following opinion: Ki kohen gadol ba'amana. When we're talking about the example of a kohen gadol with marrying an almana, a widow, ma kohen gadol ba'almana shabiato ba'avera uposel ba. The same way that this is a lav, and that therefore Rabbi Akiva certainly would say that it is a prohibited marriage, and the progeny is mamzer, and therefore it is an avera. And what does it do? According to Tanakama, it renders her yiches posel. That's what it means, posel ba. Afkol shabiato ba'avera posel. So therefore likewise, any other example of a love situation in regards to bia is going to render the woman posel. That's the Tanakhama's view. Okay. The Rabbi Yossi, who we said was the offspring view. Okay. What is his view? Rabbi Yossi Savar, Ki Kohen Gadol Ba'amana, when we take the example, the archetype, or the model of Kohen Gadol and Almana, Ma Kohen Gadol Ba'amana, Shezar'o Pasul, that his progeny, namely that child is going to be considered a halal, okay, and therefore uposel, and it would then render her, okay, also pasul, all right, from a yichus point of view, afkol shazaro pasul. So likewise, any other example where the progeny is yichus wise invalid, pasul, posel will also render the woman, the mother, pasul. Okay. Okay. What's the, however the Gemara goes on. Erwin, everything okay? Okay. La'afuke mitzri sheni, to exclude the example of a second generation Egyptian. She'ein zaro pasul, because his progeny is not considered invalid from a yichus perspective. The Amarkra, because the text of the pasuk says, "Banim asher yuladu lahem dor shlishi yavo lahem bekal Hashem." Okay, so that those progeny that will be born to them in the third generation, they are the ones eligible to enter Kahal Hashem. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, Omer, what does he say? Kol she'atano se bito, where you're able to marry the daughter, okay, of the Kohen. In this case, atano se almanato. Okay, you are able, okay, you're able to marry the widow. The kol she'iatano se et bito, and where you're not able to marry the daughter, his daughter, the Kohen's daughter, iatano se almanato, you are not able to marry his widow. Mai ika ben Rabbi Yossi, the Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. So what then is the difference between Rabbi Yossi's view, who we said was the offspring view, versus Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel's view? Okay, all right, which would seem to include offspring, but what offspring are we going to allow into the Kahal? We're going to see here Amar Ula. Okay, basically he's making, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is making a difference between the fact that a male progeny could not enter the Kahal, but a female progeny could enter the Kahal. Okay? Amar Ula, says Ula, Ger, Amoni, Umoavi, Ika Beinahu. In that case, between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, we have a difference regarding the status of the convert, the Ammonite, male Ammonite, a male Moabite. That's what's the difference between them. Ushneim lo lamduha elami kohen gadol ba'amana, and both of them learned it based on the prototype or the archetype of Kohen and Gadol and Amman. The Rabbi Yossi Savar, because Rabbi Yossi was of the opinion, Ki Kohen Gadol ba'amana, when we're talking about a Kohen Gadol marrying a widow, okay? Ma Kohen Gadol ba'amana shazaro pasul posel, uposel, that whereas when the Kohen Gadol marries a widow, okay, and therefore his progeny is pasul, therefore it renders the woman's yichus also posel, the mother's posel. Afkol shazaro pasul posel. So likewise, all examples of progeny that are of yichus status pasul posel, it renders the mother, okay, of the child also, yichus point of view, invalid. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, ki Kohen Gadol ba'almana, he also learns it based on the prototype of Kohen Gadol and Almana. Ma Kohen Gadol ba'almana shekol zaro pasul. Whereas with Kohen Gadol marrying an almanah, all of his progeny, okay, would be pasul. Notice it says shekol, that all, male and female. Afkol shekol zaro pasul, afilu nekevot. Okay, I would have thought, therefore, that it would also therefore render the females also their yichus status. Okay, all right, wait, okay, also pasul. La'afuke, to exclude, however, ger, a convert, Ammoni, an Ammonite male, umoavi, a male Moabite, the nekevot havu ksherot lavo b'kahal. Because in those situations, I would argue that the females are eligible, are valid to enter Kahal Hashem. Damar Mar. Why? Because we have a statement that tells us Ammoni velo Ammonit, a male Ammonite and not a female Ammonite. Moavi velo Moavit, a male Moabite and not a female Moabitess. Amar Rav Chisda. So now we go on. And now Rav Chisda is going to tell us his view. Hakol Modin, everybody is in agreement. Ba'almanat Esa. Okay? And we're going to clarify that in a second. Shepsula lekahuna. Okay? That a widow of mixed background. Okay? In other words, it could be that there's a safek isur halal in her background. Shepsula lekahuna. Okay? Well, whatever. The example I learned was basically safek isur halal. Okay? Shepsula lekahuna. That she then becomes, from a yichus point of view, invalid for marrying to kahuna. Man mekel bahani tonight. So if we say that that's the case, Rav Chisda's view, how do we apply it to the examples of Tanakama, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, and Rabbi Yossi? Who is the most lenient view of those three perspectives? Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. He's the one who's the most lenient. V'ka'amar. And when we're saying, kol she'atano se bito, atano se almanoto. And when we say that when you are able to marry the daughter, you're able to marry the widow. The kol she'atano se bito. And where you're not able to marry the daughter, iatano se almanoto. You're not able to marry the widow. Lema'ute mai. To what does it come to exclude? Lema'ute almanat esa. It comes to include this widow whose background yichus is mixed, shipsula lekahuna, that she is then invalid to marry in the Kohen. La'afuke midahani tanai. This comes to exclude the view of these other Tanaim. The Tanan who taught, Ha'id Rabbi Yoshua Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, that the two of them, Rabbi Yoshua and Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, where did they testify, right? Al-Amanat Esa Shikshera Lekuhuna, that a widow of mixed background or questionable background is permitted to marry into the Kohanim. My Tama, what was their reasoning? Have sfeik sfeika. Okay, was sfeik sfeika the kula. That was their argument. Now, without going into a lot of discussion on this, okay. So what happens? We saw that if the status, I began to try to understand this very quickly, as if the status of the mother is a suffix, okay, then perhaps the status of the progeny is also a suffix. That's the sfeik. But that is not necessarily the situation. The situation is more complex than that, and that the fact that clearly, if the almanah is esa, is if it's a safek isur, in regards to her background, then you could her yichus, then it could be okay that therefore that's why her status is a safek
It's
sveka,
using the term svek
and not in the usual
not literal,
case. Not in the
because
usual
she
case.
still has a cheskes kashrus, because most people are kosher.
Okay. Do you want to argue it that way? Okay, I'm not going to go in that direction right now. Okay? The point I'm simply making is the argument is clearly here that they see a double doubt in the situation, but not in the normal manner that we usually use the fake terminology in common Gemara parlance. Okay? All right, let's go on. Now we saw that the next part of the Gemara of the Mishnah talked about vada'in bevada'in mutar, those who are certain of the one yichus and the other's yichus, okay, can certainly are permitted to marry one another. That was Rabbi Elazar's view, okay, but he continued later on in the Mishnah to say if there was a doubt on the part of one versus the other on either side, okay, then they should not be married. Okay? Amar Rav Yehuda says Amar Yehuda, Rav in the name of Rav. Halacha ka Rabbi Eliezer, but we're going to call it Rabbi Elazar. Okay? Ki amrita kame de Shmuel. When this was said before Shmuel, Amarli, he said to me, Hillel shoneh. Hillel teaches it differently. Asara yuchsin alumi bavel. 10 categories of people with their yichus genealogical history, okay, went up to Bavel. Went from Bavel up to Israel. V'kulan mutarin lavo ze bazeh. And all of them are permitted to marry one to the other. Va'at amart halachak Rabbi Elazar, and you're saying that the law is like the view of Rabbi Elazar. V'rami derav adarav. If that's the case, then we have a contradiction between what Rav says here and what he says elsewhere. V'rami de Shmuel ad de Shmuel. And we have a contradiction between what Shmuel says in this case and what he says elsewhere. De itmar, because it was discussed in this, okay, the following, all right? Okay, that Rabbi Elazar is basically saying, okay, that perhaps he was giving here a earlier view, if this was a Mishnah versus a Braita, okay, and dealing with a question of status. Arusa she'ibra, a betrothed young woman who's become pregnant. Rav Amar Havlad Mamzer. Rav says the progeny is a mamzer. Ushmuel Amar Havlad Shtuki. And Shmuel argues that the progeny is a shtuki, questionable father yichus. Okay? Rav Amar Havlad Mamzer. Why is it that Rav says the child is a mamzer? Umutar b'mamzeret. But he's permitted to marry a mamzer. Okay? That would be the case. That would be fairly similar to Rabbi Elazar's view. Okay? Ushmuel Amar, and Shmuel says Havlad Shtuki, that the progeny is questionable. Va'asur b'mamzer, but would be prohibited to marry a mamzer. Okay? Which is not the view of Rabbi Elazar. Epoch, says the Gemara. Maybe we need to change the perspectives of each of them. Okay? Rav Amar Havlad Shtuki. And maybe say there that Rav says that the progeny is a Shtuki. Okay? Which would fit in earlier with what we said, Rav, okay, as to whether it's the law like Rabbi Elazar or not. Okay? Ushmuel Amar Havlad Mamzer. And Shmuel would say that the Vlad is a mamzer. Okay, tarte, both of them lamali. Why then did we have to flip their views? Tzricha, it was necessary. De'i itmar baha, because we said based on our example in the Mishnah. Okay, right? Baha ka'amar Rav. In that situation, Rav mishum derov ksharim etzla, because Rav could have argued regarding the Mishnah that most of the individuals that would have relationship with that arusa who's pregnant.
No. With a non-arusa, everybody's mutter.
Okay, well, you could well, we'll get to it. We'll get to it. Okay, you could argue whether it's the Yarusa or other women in general. Okay, aval hatam, in our case,
of the woman
particularly our Braita that focuses on the pregnant Arusa, the Rov Psulim Etzla, that maybe most people, since she's an Arusa and she's forbidden to others in her status of Arusa, they would all be pasul if they had relations with her. Okay? Ema model Shmuel. In that case, Rav might be model Shmuel.
The kid's a mom.
V'i itmar bahach. And if you say again, in the particular Braita dealing with the Arusa that's pregnant, Baha ka'amar Rav. In that situation, Rav mishum de'ika lemitla ba'arus. Why? Because Rav might argue, no, she could always claim the parentage of the child is based on the arus. Okay? Aval baha. Okay, but in this case, in the Mishnah, all right, Ema model Shmuel. That maybe in that example, he would acknowledge the view of Shmuel that the child could be then the mom's. Tzricha. That's why we needed to present both cases. Now, the Gemara, however, wants to go on and say to us, V'ibayat Ema, and if you want, I might say, Le'olam lo tepoch. Don't switch the views of Rav and Shmuel. Okay? Umay mamzer. And what are we talking about when we clarify the status of a mamzer? To ka'amar Rav, as it was said by Rav, lav mutar b'mamzeret. Then he wouldn't be permitted to marry a mamzeret. Ella da'asur b'vavat Yisrael. Then he also would be prohibited to marry any, so to speak, regular Jewish girl. Ushmuel amar havlad shtuki, and where Shmuel says that the progeny is a shtuki, da'asur b'bat Yisrael, and therefore he would be forbidden to marry a regular Jewish girl. Ihachi hainu derav. That would be then no different than the perspective of Rav. Elamai shtuki. So what then do we mean? Okay, to understand the difference. Shemishtakin oto midin kuhuna. That we silence him from the from the status, right? Okay, or from the legal position of being a part of the kuhuna. Pshita, isn't that obvious? Says the Gemara. Hashta midin Yisrael mishtakinam le midin kuhuna mibayi. If we say that he can't marry a Bat Yisrael, we're certainly already preventing him from being part of Kahal Hashem. If that's the case, how much more so certainly is he prohibited from being part of the kahuna? Okay? Elamai shtuki. So what do we mean here? Shemishtakin oto minichsei aviv. That we're saying that we prevent him from gaining any property, inheriting at all from his father. Pshita, again, isn't that obvious? Miyadin and avuha mano? Do we even know who his father is in that situation? Lo tzricha de tafas. No, it was necessary to present it with that because the fact that the young man grabbed the property, okay? He took it on his own.
He claimed that she's my father, and
Okay, he grabbed the property, grabbed the inheritance. Ve'i bayatim. And if you want, I would say my shtuki, beduki. Okay, what does we mean by shtuki? That he needs to be examined. Okay, remember? Shebodkin etimo. That was what Shmuel had said earlier.
That was Abba Shaw.
Right? Well, yeah, but it was tied into that. Okay? Va'omeret lekasher nevalti ne'emenet. Why? Because she can say, I had relations with somebody whose yichus is valid, and she's believed. Okay? Kiman, according to whom? Kiraban Gamliel. We saw that was the case because the previous staff said it was according to Rabban Gamliel, but also according to Abba Shaul. Right? The Amar Shmuel Chadazimna, as was said by Shmuel one time earlier, the Tnan is taught in the Mishnah, Haita me'uberet, if she were pregnant, V'amru la ma tivo shel ubar zeh, what's the status of this fetus? Me'ish ploni v'kohenhu, that she could say he's from so-and-so and he happens to be a Kohen. Rabban Gamliel v'Rabbi Eliezer omrim ne'emre. The two of them say that she is believed. And Rabbi Yoshua Omer Einan Ne'emenet, just reviewing what we had on a previous staff, that Rabbi Yoshua disagreed. Right? Va'amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, halacha k'Rabban Gamliel. And Rav Yehuda said in Shmuel's name, the law is like Rabban Gamliel, right? Tzricha. And we needed that. Why? De'ime hatim hava. Because if there, in other words, from the Mishnah that we found in a Ketubot, where there's this discussion, right? Amina hatam rov ksherim etzla. Because there we said that the majority of,
She can sleep with whoever she
okay,
wants.
of people that she had relations with were a valid yichus, right?
No,
Aval.
it's not yichus, it's rishus. If she's a panua, it's not min haTorah usher for her to sleep with most men because she can marry most men.
All right, that's
No,
one
not
shot. That's one shot. Okay, but the point is that she had their status was kasher, right? Aval hacha, right here regarding the arusa, okay, the rov psulim etzla, where we're talking that could be a situation that most were pasul with her, right? Emelo, I would say no, shricha, all right. So it is needed. Tanya. And we learned elsewhere in a bright. V'chein Rabbi Elazar Omer. And likewise Rabbi Elazar says, okay, kuti lo yisa kutit. Okay, that a kuti should not marry a kutit. My Talmud. What's the reasoning there? Amar Rav Yosef, says Rav Yosef, okay, asahu keger le'echad asarado. Oh, asa, okay, asahu keger la'achar asaradoro. Okay, that he makes him parallel to a convert after 10 generations. In other words, after some time, it gets mixed in with others and you don't know, okay, or you don't remember, okay, what the yichus of that individual was. The Tanya, ger ad asara dorot, mutar b'mamzeret, because we have a braita that says that the convert after 10 generations is permitted with regards to a mamzeret. Mikan va'elech, asur b'mamzeret. From then on, forbidden, because then that ger was clearly mixed in and considered like any other Jew, which would be prohibited to marry a mamzer. V'yesh omrim, and there are those who say, ad sheyishtaka shem avodat kochavim mimena, until the origin of the person being an idol worshiper falls away from
the
him.
10 is just
okay, it's just the 10 is not clearly 10. It's just after so much time. Okay, that's the point. Amarle Abaye, mi dami. Abaye challenges Rav Yosef here. Are they really comparable? Hatam ger yashan. Mamzeret chadasha. You're talking about a ger, somebody who converted, and and time has passed since their conversion, so it's not, you wouldn't necessarily know or remember that the family had that conversion there. But in terms of a mamzeret, that's recent. Okay, that's recent history. Okay, Amrei bar Yisrael, who deka nasiv mamzeret. People would say that's like any other Jew marrying a mamzeret, which is not.
What if there's one individual who remembers that person?
Well, then it's known.
Then it's a
Then
known fact.
Then it's a known fact.
Right.
But we're talking 200 years. We're
Okay.
talking like 10,
But
circa
there'll
10.
be someone who traces his genealogy and remembers this person.
Yeah, but
Right.
people, all right.
But we're but
Even
the
in
point,
that case, if the
you know,
guy himself,
a few generations might remember.
All right.
Okay.
Yes,
But
I guess after
numerous
10
generations.
they'll forget. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I know the
The
situation
person
you
himself
refer
would
to.
die then.
Okay, but I'll take a terrible example and then come right back. Let's assume that when the Cossacks came into Russia,
pogrom is
okay,
a pogrom.
during a pogrom, and they raped a woman, and she had a child, okay, and that child then, okay, would have this
status of
a problematic status, okay, but if it was that, but if that information weren't passed on, okay, then no one necessarily would know that progeny of that progeny of progeny of progeny of that situation would be aware of
the
it.
name Poretsky means that somewhere along the line, the Porets was with a Jewish girl.
I never heard of that.
That's
I'm
what it
not
means.
sure. I don't know. I really don't know. And I wouldn't go around telling that. Okay? All right. Hacha idi ve'idi ki hadadi ninhu. But here we have this one and this one, right? Ki ata Rav Dimi. Now we get the problem. Ki ata Rav Dimi. When Rav Dimi came, what did he say? Rabbi Elazar savarla ki Rabbi Yishmael. He says that, all right, that Rabbi Elazar held like the view of Rabbi Yishmael. Okay, now I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but what is this basis of Kuti can't marrying a Kuti? All right, the argument could be these were the Shomronim, the Samaritans, and at a certain time there were some that considered their conversion valid conversions. There were others who did not consider their conversions valid conversions. Okay, exactly. Not only that, but geographically, you had, okay, at a certain time, you had an area where you had the Galil, where it was Jewish habitation. Then you had a whole area that was primarily Samaritan habitation. Then you had Yehuda, that was further south, which was Jewish habitation. So that also had, so geographically and demographically, there were issues here.
Footnote 48 goes into it.
Okay. All right. So make a circle or something if you're using ArtScroll on that example, and you'll read it on your own, please. Okay. So what was it? He claims, we saw, right, that Rav Dimi claimed that Rabbi Elazar, who's held this opinion, held like Rabbi Yishmael. And our Gemara goes on the top of the Amud. Okay, Rabbi Yishmael savar like Rabbi Akiva, and he held the view of Rabbi Akiva. Okay, all right, that conversion was under duress on the part of the Kutim, and therefore they're not really Jews. The Rabbi Elazar savar like Rabbi Yishmael, and the Rabbi Elazar held like Rabbi Yishmael. The Amar Kutim gerei arayothem. Okay, that was the reason. So therefore they're not Jews. for Rabbi Yishmael, Savala ka Rabbi Akiva, and we're saying that Rabbi Yishmael held like Rabbi Akiva. The Amar Oved Kochavim ve'Eved Haba'al Bat Yisrael Havlad Mamzer. Okay, notice that they're repeating what Rabbi Akiva's position was every time. Okay, does that really mean that Rabbi Yishmael also held that the relations with a Gentile or a servant, okay, produced a mamzer progeny? Okay, umi savala Rabbi Yishmael to Rabbi Akiva, and did Rabbi Yishmael really agree with the view of Rabbi Akiva? Va'amar Rabbi Yochanan mishum Rabbi Yishmael. But didn't Rabbi Yochanan say in the name of Rabbi Yishmael, Minayin la'oved kochavim ve'eved shaba'u al hakohenet? How is it that when a Gentile, okay, or a servant has relations with a Kohenet, va'al halaviyah, or with a Leviyah, va'al bat Yisrael, or bat Yisrael, shepasluha, that they rendered her yichus invalid, right? Right? Shene Amar, as it says, ubat Kohen ki tiyeh almana ugrusha v'zera ein la, with a daughter of a Kohen, where it would be such that her status as a widow or as a divorcee or one who has produced progeny, she's not, does not have such progeny. Mi sheyeshlo almanut ugrushin. It means she must be able to be a widow or a divorcee from this man. Yatsa oved kochavim ve'eved she'ein lo almanut ugrushin. This excludes the example of the Gentile or the servant who is not able to put her in a status where she could be a widow or a divorcee. Ve'isal gadata. And if you're of the opinion Savar la Rabbi Eliezer Akiva, and if you're of the opinion that he held like Rabbi Akiva, Hashta Mamzer Havi Mifsal B'Viato Mibai. If that's the case, all right, then now regarding the Mamzer, okay, doesn't it, okay, doesn't it render then in any kind of physical situation? Why do we even have to question that? Okay, Ella rather, Rabbi Elazar Savala to Rabbi Yishmael, but it must be that Rabbi Elazar is of the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael, namely, the Amar Kutim Gere Arayot, that the Samaritans were conversions under duress. The Savala to Rabbi Akiva, and then also holds like the view of Rabbi Akiva. The Amar Oved Kochavim ve'Eved Haba'al Bat Yisrael Havlad Mamzer, that he also holds like Rabbi Akiva. So Gemara naturally asks, Umi Savala Rabbi Elazar to Rabbi Akiva? Are you really sure that we can say that Rabbi Elazar holds this perspective like Rabbi Akiva? Va'amar Rabbi Elazar. But didn't Rabbi Elazar say, Afal pi shenichlaku Beit Shammai u Beit Hillel b'tzarot, even though there was a difference of opinion between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel in regards to co-wives. Modim she'ein mamzer. They both agreed that the progeny would not be a mamzer. Okay. Ella mimisha isuro isur erva va'anush koret. In other words, mamzer status was only declared in a situation where isuro isur, where the marriage was forbidden, isur erva, or va'anush koret, okay, and are also prohibited, punishable by koret.
And it was
Then
it excludes a rape.
Then
No.
The kid's a mamzer, but here we're talking about either a case where it's an erva, like it's a
Yeah,
incest,
an Arab, yeah.
Yeah.
or adultery.
Down.
That's what the two.
In other words, the two cases that they're saying that the mamzer status would only be limited, if I can use that term, okay, to situations where there's isur erva, okay, a clear example of the prohibition of erva, but not like Rabbi Akiva, okay,
Not any old wife.
right, right, and the other situation being that that would be punishable by kari,
Which is
Right.
adultery.
okay. So what happens? Ella ki ata Ravin, but now remember Ravin also commuted back and forth, just as Rav Dimi did, okay, for learning. Ravin comes, Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Va'amrela, and some say, Amar Rabbi Abba bar Zavda, Amar Rabbi Chanina, in the name of Rabbi Chanina. Va'amrela, and others still say, Amar Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi, Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. So we've got three different Masoras here
That are all the same.
that are all going to present the same message. Shalosh machlokot b'davar, that there were three arguments in regarding this situation. Rabbi Yishmael Savar, he was of the opinion, Kutim gerei arayotin, that Rabbi Yishmael did feel that the Samaritans were an example of conversion under duress, right? And what happens? The Kohanim shenitma'u bahem, and those Kohanim that became
Intermarried.
contaminated through them. In other words, they may have intermarried among the Kutim. Kohanim psulim hayu, they are to be considered invalid Kohanim. Shnei as it's we're told, v'ya'asu lahem miksotam kohanei bamot. Why? Because they made their miksoah, if you will, they made their status using those bamot. Okay, those bamot used by the Kuti. Okay, ve'amar Rava bar Barchana, amar Rabbi Yochanan. He said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, min hakutzim shaba'am umishum hachi paslinu. Okay, they are like. Okay, well, one translation could be directly, they're like thorns in the people. Okay, we talk about a pain in the you know what. Okay, so they are problematic. Okay, they're separate. Umishum hachi paslinu. And that's the reason that we rendered those Kohanim psulim. The Rabbi Akiva Sava, but Rabbi Akiva was of the opinion, Kutim gerei emet hein. He felt that the Kutim were originally proper gerim, proper gerim. The Kohanim shenitma'u bahem, Kohanim sherim hayu, and those Kohanim that became part of mixed in with them or contaminated through them, they are still were valid Kohanim. Why? Shnei Amar, citing the pasuk, v'yasu lahem mikzotam kohanei bamot. Okay, citing the same pasuk. Some of them, okay, did it. Va'amar Rabba bar Barchan, he says as follows. What? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, the following. Minha bechirim, from the best shebahem. Ve'elav mipnei ma asrum, mipnei shahayu mibamim et ha'aruso. Why did they render them invalid? Why? Because they had a different view on the issue of women that were betrothed and married, okay? Because they would require women who were betrothed to go through Yibum, okay? And just roll over a little bit on the top of Ayin Vav, upotrim et hanisuot. And they would exempt married women, okay, from Yibum and Chalitza.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was the basis that they did that? We'll see another day.
Rabbi Green, I seem to remember many years ago, there was a woman who lived in Brooklyn, and she was raped. and they spoke to Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, and she wanted to have an abortion. He talked her out of it, and he told her that he convinced her that the child it's a living child. She should grow up. He convinced her to not to have an abortion. That means the child was in the mamzer.
All right,
Rabbi Green.
okay.
Is there any case where it would not be a mamzer?
Well, the question would be, how could they reverse that status? That
And
was,
also her rape. If she was raped by a Jew,
well,
then the child is not halachically a Muslim.
No, she was not raped by a Jew, by a
No.
Christian.
Okay, then the child is a Muslim. But now, if she was not engaged, if she was not married or engaged, if she was just
She was married. She was a
she
married.
was a married woman.
married woman. That's the problem. Okay, so, and then, so I guess he felt that under the circumstances, that it would better to let the child live and be in that status, mamzer status, and work with that status rather than have the abortion. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that everybody. I mean, that was his psa. I'm not sure that everyone would paskin in the same way.
What was his question?
To kill the child.
If the individual knows he's a mamzer, or his great 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 grandfather was a mamzer, okay, but nobody else knows, then it's up to him. If the concept of mamzer is no longer shown in the community, then the person is kosher. Well, not really, but he has a hesed title, and he can marry whoever he wants. So you're talking about a person who did a genealogy and found out he was a mom, right? So now he has to and they will tell him he has to divorce.
No, it's a little different situation.
The woman was married. She was raped.
In marriage,
She was married and raped.
okay. The child is the father, is the husband. Halachically, the child is
They would, they would,
The woman wanted to have an abortion. Convinced her
that she could not.
she did not have an abortion.
Because
Because
the
they'll-
undine is
they'll,
that even if, like, the Rahman al-Islam, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed couple have a black baby, the halacha is that the father is because 999 times out of 1,000, the father is always the father.
you
So
attribute
halachically,
attribute it to the
father rape doesn't matter. And if a woman's raped, except for a cohen, she can remain married. The only circumstance is an Ashes cohen. He has to divorce her. But others, it's just an unfortunate incident that she goes to a shrink and she gets over.
Well, the point is,
No, the child is not.
no, they're going to attribute the birth to the father.
The child is not. Correct. If a single girl is raped,
Sure, thank you. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. What? No, how long do we have?
No, it won't be a week, 2 weeks. I told her I'd like them within 2 weeks.
Good morning, Ruth. Hey, how are you? Yeah. John? Yeah, hopefully. So long as we'll see, I start the first of the Mohs surgeries today. Yeah, so if there's a problem, I'll let you know.
I was in the hospital yesterday.
You were in the hospital yesterday? All right, let's try to rest up.
I don't have time. I have to take these to do.
All right.
By the way, who you going to?
My regular dermatologist does it. No, he does it himself. So I hope not. No, I'm gonna walk. Thank you.